So the folks that are present, and I'll hand it over to Daniel. Again, this is the curatorial work of Daniel Muchina and Wangechi Ngugi, who have been great partners and collaborators. And then in person, in LA, we have Ezra and Buki, who made the Golden Chain. And then on Zoom, we have Philippa Ndisi Herrmann, who is joining us from Nairobi as well. Are you in Nairobi, Philippa? Yes. And of course, Daniel's in Nairobi as well. And yeah, I'll just hand it over to Daniel, so you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Janelle, for the intro. And thank you all for being here. It's a great honor and pleasure to be moderating this discussion. My name is Daniel Muchina. Again, I'm a film and video artist living and working in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm also the co-curator for the program tonight, Ritualizing Knowledge Systems, which is a program born out of the desire to explore how knowledge systems can be preserved, how they can be challenged, and also how they can be transformed. So by embracing experimental, speculative, and futuristic narratives, this program imagines how these knowledge systems might evolve or persist, ensuring that the sacred continues to inform both cultural identity and even in radically transforming settings. So I'm just gonna go straight to my questions, and the first question is something I'd like to ask all the guys in attendance, Philippa, Buki, and Ezra. I'd like to know in what ways does cinema as a tool of in what ways do you think cinema plays as a in what ways do you think cinema as a tool of reimagining knowledge systems, especially in relation to the themes of ancestry, ritual practices, and identity? And how do you navigate the balance between preserving cultural specificity and also making these narratives resonate with a global audience? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can start with maybe Buki and Ezra, and then we can move on to Philippa.
Yeah, sure. I think that in general, science fiction is a great medium to blend those two things, cultural specificity and trying to relate to a larger audience. Science fiction in general has always been a medium where people allow storytellers to push viewers to expand their minds, to think about things in different ways, and to combine ideas in different ways. And so we definitely use science fiction in our storytelling in that way.
Yeah, I think for me too, part of it is it's about trying to find ways to make sense of these ideas and motifs that may seem specific, but I think also, at least from my perspective, it's about putting these things in a place that it kind of can create a dialogue to add the specificity that may be lacking in even my understanding of some of these ideas. I think that's what I was trying to get with co-creating the Golden Chain. Was it's kind of about, for me, it was about a flailing for a connection to something that had been severed. And so I think for me, like the patterns and the visual motifs that you see in this film is me trying to almost put these things out there as a beacon almost. And I think even the idea of the film leading to conversations like this with you guys in Kenya is like almost proof that it worked.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of my favorite films in the program, and I think it's also a film that we kind of curated before. It's one of my favorites, and I think it fits perfectly with our program for today. Maybe Philippa, you could tell us what you think about cinema in regards to it being like imagining, knowledge systems, especially in relation to like the work that you're doing.
Okay, good morning, good evening. I'm happy to meet you all, and I really liked the program. I found it really captivating, so well done on the curation. I think first and foremost, I see cinema and the screen as a sacred temple that creatives can come to, even before they've started making the film, even when we're conceiving ideas, building ideas. And then it's something that we offer to the viewer, and it's also for them a temple of remembrance. And I think it's an interesting question, and the only thing I can offer at this point in time is I would say that whether one is super specific or super not specific, I do believe that our intuition as creatives will guide us to know, we all know this when we're working. There's like, you try, you watch, you kind of shift it, you realize, so your intuition guides you. And I think depending on where the viewer is at, and because we're all so unique in our own ways, we will respond at different points in time based on what we're seeing. So there may be things I see in The Golden Chain today, and then 5 years later, something else speaks to me, and we can relate to that with all films that we see. And I do believe, especially with the subject at hand, it's all about reminding us, for us as creatives, but also as the audience, remembering. You may just see even an image, and that somehow just opens something in your mind, your spirit, and then it also takes you on your own pathway. So that's my answer for the moment.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you. I completely agree. I think also for me, I think in what you kind of said, I think also cinema kind of serves as a ceremonial conduit for people, especially when it comes to kind of processing the mysteries of existence. Just like dreaming, I think probably cinema is the closest we come to like collective dreaming. And just as like dreams are also very rich with like symbolic meaning, cinema also kind of taps into these archetypal images that can and metaphors that connect deeply with human experiences. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Philippa. So I think the other thing I'm curious in knowing is because one of the things that I've noticed is like the human body is a thing that emerges as a significant ritualistic element in the works that have been presented in this program. So my question would be, how does the human body serve as a symbol in your work? And what deeper meanings maybe or narratives does the body convey within the context of your like artistic expression? Yeah, maybe we can just go with you, Philippa, and then we'll finish with Buki and Ezra.
I'm trying to think of, because I'm also like seeing the images of the films. If the Ezra and I forgot your name, but if
Buki.
if you could maybe start, if you have the answer,
yes,
and I'll
yes, yes. Because Buki, the thing I noticed was like in the film, Yetunde is kind of interacting with a doll. And so I'm kind of curious to know like what your thoughts are in regards to like the role that the human body takes in your work as a symbol, maybe. Because in your film, I noticed that it was like a ritual interface. Like she was kind of trying to connect with these other individuals via this doll. And there are very interesting moments within that particular film that stand out for me, especially when she kind of logs off from speaking to her male, I think it's like a companion or friend. And then she kind of, when the body is left empty, she kind of hugs the body and she has like this kind of interesting moment. And then like the phone, I mean, there's a call that comes in and then she kind of realizes that maybe it's not necessarily appropriate to be kind of picking a call while hugging the body. So I'm interested in knowing like the dynamics of sharing that in your work, like the symbolism of the human body.
Yeah, sure. So in general, the golden chain is it's a very loose adaptation of the Yoruba creation myth. But in the same time, it's mixed in with this idea of, from this Radiolab episode I listened to back when Radiolab was Radiolab, where the idea was that you could create a universe in your kitchen sink, but to test if the universe worked, you'd have to destroy the current universe you're in. And a lot of the themes of the Yoruba creation myth is is about accidentally creating life and having to balance the responsibility of that. And it's also mixed in with my longing of trying to connect with my own culture. I was born in Nigeria, but I left when I was 2. And so there's always this disconnect of trying to be close but feel far at the same time. So I think Yetunde very much represents that, where she's, she has her lover, Andre, but it's too much when he's there, it's easier when she can deal with it from a distance, in the same way that I feel like a lot of us immigrant children are trying to connect, but it's we're there but not there. And it's you kind of have to, again, decide, is it going to be destroying everything to have everything connect together in kind of a very messy way?
Yeah, I think for me, there's something off that. There's something about the interiority of Yetunde's experience that I think we were trying to get at, this idea that she's so concerned and interested with what exists within this unknowable thing at the center of the structure that she's in, that the shell doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of what we were getting at a little bit with the doll, is the body, whether it's Yetunde's body or the body of the doll, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. The thing that matters is the thing that's at the core, the center of it. And in the metaphor of the ship, it's Cian, the universe that's at the core of the ship. But in the human body, it's the spirit, or in the doll, it's the person who's calling in. So I think a lot of it was just us having fun with that idea, having fun with the idea that the body is kind of inconsequential.
And temporary, and that many times and visions and cultures can pass through this one medium, this very, I don't know, kind of transient experience.
Okay. The reason I was asking that is because one of the main elements in ritual practices in the continent in Africa is the body is kind of the most prominent element within all rituals. So that's why I was asking about the human body. Maybe Philippa, if you have any comments in regard to it doesn't necessarily have to be with seeds, although with seeds I've also seen that there's a human figure who's kind of veiled and there's movement. And so yeah, maybe if you could expand a little on what that maybe represents for you in your practice, in your artistic exploration maybe.
Okay, so one thing I also wanted to say is that in the golden chain, when we have the images of the woman dancing with the
Yes.
This pattern that's happening behind is so powerful and so beautiful, and the let's say the bleeding of the images, and for me it also reminded me of batik and tie dye, but it's very, very powerful. And I mentioned this because you also mentioned the human body, and you get the sensation when you're watching the images of this. The body is the mechanism for conjuring the soul, conjuring the spirit, right? Engaging with these different aspects oneself as well as, let's say, the universe. So I think your question is interesting for me because I mean, at the moment, I'm writing a fiction film about a dancer and connecting it to all this the ritual elements, right? But I do feel that, especially in my documentary, my essay, my experimental work, I don't I don't think I use the body as much. I think on a personal level, I find the body to be very beautiful and very evocative, but I haven't fully, for myself, been able to unlock the body and to not just see what I see, like to see other things. I haven't figured out how to see other things in the body. As an artist, as a person, I can appreciate it. So I think I mean, even in Seeds, you see it. I use voice a lot more, and I'm very curious. I guess voice and poetry tends to be my starting point, and natural images of nature tend to be my starting point. And then I'm also curious about using different sounds and juxtaposing ideas to. So I think, how would I say it? It's like using sounds that are very unrelated and creating an evocation in that, an evocation in the words that you hear, and somehow kind of like imprinting that on the images that you're seeing. So I think basically I'm going to sit with that about the human body. And I think sound is very interesting for me because that feels also a lot more visceral and it enters yourself like from left field. Because we're inundated with bodies, with images of bodies. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think even like the idea of like the sounds that you use and even the voice, I think there's a way that they have. For me, when I was watching Seeds, it still had like an embodied experience for myself. Like I could feel things with my physical body. And so that's why I was so curious to know like whether like that was like a deliberate thing, because I find like a lot of the times that's how we kind of consume images as humans. We sort of embody them, and sometimes the images we see and the sounds that we hear can trigger sort of like our memories that are like still locked in our bodies, and like we can have those kind of dynamic experiences. So yeah, that was a very beautiful answer, Philippa. Thank you. So yeah, Jonah,
I just wanted to, I wanted to add something, which is Seeds was a film that was made like, I was making a feature-length documentary, and me and the editor, Angie Wamai, we decided to just put something together with no budget, no money. And a lot of my essay work has been done with no money. So there was no money for score. So it was like, okay, what sounds can I find from my documentary archive? What sounds can I record? What sounds can I find from YouTube? Like, how can we create, like, take a sound but reappropriate the sound? So the sound is no longer the sound of a record player, but it's something else that does that. And I think I'm grateful for the experience because it allows you to be much more creative, and in a way open to the spiritual process of creating. Like, how can I be open as a vessel and then just mishmash things and see what is created, right? Leaving space for for spirit or the creative music.
Yeah, I kind of relate with that experience in that process of creating as well. Yeah, so thank you for that. My other question for maybe Buki and Ezra, you had mentioned that the Golden Chain is kind of based on the Yoruba creation mythology. So maybe you can share some of your reflections on how your film engages with this mythology, and maybe you can also expand a bit on how like this influences like your understanding of the relationship between like technology and spirituality.
All your questions are so hard.
Oh my God. Maybe like you can just talk to us about like how your film engages with the Yoruba creation mythology. We can start there and then I can sort of.
Yeah, so like I said, I was being very loose with the connection, with the structure of the story. I was really
Maybe.
I was really
Okay.
interested in this idea of like the point in the myth, and also the point in the in general in my work. I used to do a lot of work about apocalypse narratives and creation myths. So I'm really interested in that moment of destruction and creation, and that was a thing that really attracted me to the story, that something needed to be destroyed to be created, and there's such a beautiful tension there. And as humans, we're so loose with life in a sad way, and we're always looking for the newest thing. So it was really interesting to get into the psychology of a woman who really wanted to create something, but knowing that in creating something it was going to be her ultimate destruction. And so that's kind of the main tension and the main point that we were really focused on.
Okay. I was actually very impressed with like the dialogue, and the conversations that Yetunde would have her
Andre.
colleagues, and it was so interesting to like kind of listening to the theories and like the stuff that she was coming up with. So I'm very interested to know like what inspired that sort of dialogue, like the idea that not everything is knowable, and we should be okay with knowing that not everything is comprehensible. Yeah, I'm interested to know like what informed sort of like that sort of angle in the film. Like the writing was very interesting for me. I thought it was so well done. So I'm interested to know like what inspired that.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I think, I mean, for me personally, I'm just a big science and science fiction nerd. So I found a lot of joy in like working with Bookie to come up with the idea for the basic concept, but then pushing that concept like to the edges of like known science and doing research and
Yeah.
talking to, like, I had a friend who's a physicist and talking to him about like, you know, what is the actual theory around ideas like this, and are some of our ideas jibing with like actual known science? And I think it was really interesting to me as someone who has a somewhat ambivalent relationship to spirituality, to sort of push the science to the point that it does become spiritual, to the point where like this thing that like science by definition being like things that are knowable, like what happens at the edge of the knowable and the unknowable. And I think like conceptually, like the philosophy, or just like the feeling that I was trying to go for with this short was like, you know, above like the humor and the fun and like the poppiness of it, because it was a really fun project to work on, and I think it's fun to watch. But I think that feeling that you get when you think about what came before the Big Bang, or the idea that like the universe is expanding, but when you think about what's beyond the border of the universe, like when you try to fathom that in your mind, the way your mind kind of just shuts off because you don't have like the capacity to understand something like that. I was really interested in trying to, you know, create a new realm to conjure that feeling.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that was very fascinating for me to just listen to like the conversations she was having, and like, you know, it had me like looking up some of these theories and like trying to also kind of understand.
Yeah, we wanted the
the ideas of
science to
like
be real, I think, because
yeah
we really wanted the science to feel real and plausible, in the same way that, you know, in ancient times, people used these myths as science, and it was real to them. So we wanted there to be a plausibility in the story.
yeah that definitely came through for sure. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, so maybe my final question for Philippa is I'm very this is probably like a personal question I'm asking you, but I'm very interested what the metaphor of the sea means to you, in your exploration of like the connection between ancestry and blood memory. And maybe expand a bit on the function of like the function that mythology takes in your artistic practice.
Okay. Okay, so you were talking about the symbolism of the sea as well as mythology.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Yeah, like just generally like what the sea maybe symbolize to you, especially in seeds, because I mean that's like I feel like that was like maybe the thing that came out the most was like the idea of like the sea as this place that all these things are kind of coming together. Yeah, so I'm just curious to know like what your feelings, what your thoughts are around like the sea and maybe the presence of the sea within seeds. And then maybe after you can talk about like the role mythology takes in your practice. Yeah.
Okay, so what what because I mean I have my own spiritual beliefs that are always evolving, and I find that through my work I like to really ground it in nature, because I find that most people can understand life through the lens of nature. You don't have to be a believer in spirit. We know the laws of nature, we know the cycles of nature. So, so even in seeds, I mentioned the sea was the last to see us. The sea was the first to see us. The sea was the last to leave us. I mean, that can be in relation to, you can be talking about spirit or God or, whatever, but the sea is much more, I think it's not only is it more visceral, but it's also more understandable, right? So for me, the water, the sea has always been a place of solace, a place of understanding. The sea, I feel, can understand me more than sometimes I can even understand myself. And it's ever constant, but it's moving, it's shifting, all of these many things. And it's mystical. And I was actually with some friends a few nights ago, and we're comparing the Indian Ocean, which of course we know as Kenyans, that's our sea. And they were talking about the Atlantic, in West Africa. And I was thinking about like when I lived in Cape Town or when I was in Senegal. And it's true, like that sea has a lot less compassion for you. You can go to the sea wanting to like find your solace, and you can get swept up. And Seeds was like the first of three films that I made, and the third one was called Adebukola, which was based on a poem that a friend of mine, a Mexican friend, wrote. And it was interesting because I think at that point in time, when I worked on Adebukola, which was like 3 years ago, I realized that the sea for me is representative of spirit, of God, of source. And I think having experienced more in my own life, I also realized that the sea is complicit, and the sea, aka, God is complicit in sometimes being an observer of very difficult things. Sometimes is complicit in actually not taking steps to stop things that I believe to be injustices. So the sea can be very cruel, and it leaves lots of questions. I mean, the sea, of course, we know about the Middle Passage, right? Yeah. The sea in that way was complicit. So I do believe my relationship with the sea, with the ocean is changing, but I do also see that initially I had much softer, much more naive opinions about the sea and a much more that kind of relationship. And now, yeah, it's a completely, it's always evolving. And I'm curious to hear your response. In regard to mythology, I mean, it's fascinating, mythology. I mean, I growing up in Kenya, in the way that I grew up, it was a very kind of anglicized. The mythology I knew is Greek, Roman. Also being an astrologer, a lot of astrology is linked to Greek and Roman mythology, so I'm more familiar with that. I'm familiar with some mythology from here, some mythology from Western Africa, based on like Yoruba culture, and also like reading about more indigenous mythology. And I think as we are aware, mythology connects to that collective unconscious, right? Yeah. We all can relate to the story of myths. And I do believe that taking the idea that storytelling and oration was so much a part of, especially in indigenous, not just indigenous cultures, but in general, it's a way that cultures were able to understand each other. It was a way of me being able to tell my story to you and you understand me, but you understanding our culture through the story I'm telling you and helping you problem solve as well. To understand like, okay, this has happened before. This is how I can apply myself based on these stories. So I think myths can be very specific, but they tap into the universality of us all. And they're also playful, and they also lean into that science fiction, breaking the bounds of what we understand of the world, which is, and of course we need to be living more in the bounds of our natural, like our scientific laws, because that's where we find the playfulness. That's where we understand ourselves and our world more. I feel like I rambled. It's a bit, I'm still forming my thoughts so early in the morning, but those are my answers for now.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense, and I agree. I think that's interesting, and it's also a very beautiful way of looking at things. And yeah, thank you for that. I don't have any more questions. Those were the only questions I was curious about. I was very curious about the specific questions I've asked. I don't have any questions coming up in my mind right now, so maybe I can open it up to the audience.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I was going to say. If there's any audience questions, Any questions? Adam was texting me questions, so that's why I was looking. Maybe I can. He had a question. Maybe Daniel, this is for you. This is a question that Adam had.
Okay.
The presence of dance and performance in several of these films. It sounds like Adam is curious about entopy, kind of this delineation between it was the Utapashi as a dance, but not as a ritual, not with the healing. And so I think there's this question about, what that delineation was in relation to more kind of colonial imbued religions, and maybe how that found its way to resonate for you in this program that you and Wangechi were putting together.
So you repeat the question. Oh. So I didn't catch.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. He texted me literally a paragraph, so I'm trying to whittle it down. Clearly, he's been wondering about this for a while. But okay, in Tapi, they talk about African traditional ritual to being acceptable to colonialist religions, tourism, etc., when it's just the dancing. So, and also, I think further in his question, the presence of dancing and performance across several of the films. So I think the question is around why there's that delineation in Tapi, and what you made of that delineation between it as a quote Utapashi as a dance versus when it actually is imbued with the spirituality and healing, and then maybe how that also relates to the presence of dance performance. And I think this follows your question about the body, across the program and across the different films.
Yeah, I wish Jim was here to answer that question, because he's like the guy who made the film. But for me, I think one of the things that stands out is the idea that there's the performative aspect of rituals in Africa that kind of has sort of been accepted by sort of the mainstream religions, that's Christianity, and because that can't ever be, they can't take that away from people, the expression of ideas and the expression of just the self through the body. It has always been like a dance has always been a part of our culture. But the thing that kind of becomes a problem and is evident in Tapi is this idea that these rituals also have that these rituals have a spiritual aspect to them, and that's where it becomes a problem for most of these mainstream religions, because they're okay with African rituals as long as it's just performative and it doesn't go deeper than just being a performative act. But the moment you infuse spirit within the ritual, then it becomes a problem. And that's the thing that I also kind of wanted to sort of use in this program, is to kind of just bring that up, like what is it about, what is the power behind African rituals, and the use of the human body within these rituals, and why mainstream religions kind of have a they don't necessarily accept that in like society, and so yeah, I mean, I'm also kind of just thinking about those things. I think, I think this, I think spirit is definitely just like Philippa said. I think it's the thing that a lot of us as human beings have a kind of a problem agreeing on. I mean, this idea of faith is a thing that's very contentious in Africa. For like, where you put your faith determines whether you're going to sort of move ahead in your society or not. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, especially nowadays when you go to say a hospital or some of these government agencies, there's always a question they ask you, and they ask you, are you Christian, or are you Muslim, or are you Hindu, or are you other? You know what I mean? And when you say, when you put other, you know, which it kind of, you're always kind of seen as someone who is not necessarily in tandem with the conventional values that kind of uphold the society together. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that I'm very interested in the idea of like I don't think you can ever really like separate the human body from like the spiritual element, that because I think the human body is an expression of that divine force that lives in all of us. But because of our cultural heritage and the fact that a lot of these mainstream religions feel like they see it as a threat, they kind of use the state powers to sort of negate the spirit and only leave like the body as just this performative vessel that is not necessarily inspired by spirit per se, but is inspired by the outside world. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but I'm kind of just I'm telling you what I'm thinking at the moment about this. It's also quite evident in Osaina, which is a short that is also in the program. And Osaina itself is like kind of investigating these two elements, the ritual elements, that's the human body as a process of being, and also water as an alchemical agent in the process of purification and transformation, which for me is like the spirit element in our world. I think, yeah, I don't know whether I've answered your question, because I can keep on talking about this, and I'm not sure whether like I'm answering your question. Have I answered your question?
No, I think,
Or should I just...
it was from Adam, and I think he's off dealing with stuff in the back, so he'll watch it back and then tell you if it didn't answer his question.
Maybe I can expand a bit on Osaina within the context of Osaina, so maybe then it can make a bit more sense. So some of my reflections around Osaina incorporate the work of a neuroscientist who's called Vittorio Galis, on his theory of experimental aesthetics and embodied simulation. I don't know whether you guys have kind of come across that guy and his work. So I'm kind of going to briefly run his ideas through the concept and expression of Usaina to explore like the connection between the intuitive aesthetic powers of the human body and water within the context of like ritual practices in Africa. So the theory of embodied simulation emphasizes that aesthetic experience is not just an intellectual act, you know, it involves visceral and direct engagement with the world through our sensory motor system. So this kind of allows us to empathize with and also feel through what we perceive. So the idea is that we don't just observe movement or ritual actions in cinema, we experience them through our own nervous system as if we were performing them ourselves. So in Osaina, the human body as a process of being kind of aligns with this idea where like the ritual movements, postures, and gestures are supported by the auditory cues within the film, invoke an aesthetic response within the viewer, who then internally simulates those actions through their own bodily awareness. So yeah, so that's like in relation to the body. The other ritual element is water, and it is kind of depicted as a medium that responds to the spiritual states of the performer, and by extension, within this theory, the audience. Therefore, it becomes like a functional mechanism that connects the imaginary worlds with with physical reality. So I'd say in regards to water, it then becomes like a mirror of transformation, which, you know, washes away the boundaries of self and the other and allows the viewer to sort of experience the ritual, and not just as an observer, but as someone immersed in the very currents of the story. So this idea of like this ritual process of purification and transformation through bodily interaction with water, for example, becomes, under this theory, right, becomes a shared intimate experience with the audience, triggering unconscious cultural memories through the very act of beholding these, what I'd call archetypal images. And these images then are become more than representatives, or they become more than representations, you know. They become lived experiences that kind of resonate with the viewer's own bodily and emotional memory. So yeah, that's kind of where like the idea of Usaina, I mean, my reflections of Usaina are based on, and it's also like kind of also what like Philippa also said about like what the role water takes within many cultural practices, not just in Africa, all across the world. And also the human body also has this interface that allows you to sort of, you know, engage with the world and engage with the other, but also kind of is also a barrier. And so like combining these two elements together where like the body kind of dissolves in this water is something that fascinates me. And yeah, and it kind of, I feel like I'm always trying to sort of not just show the physical element of it, but like if there's a way that I can also sort of immerse spirit within the work of the performance, but it goes beyond the performance, because when the viewer is watching it, then you become part of this performance yourself. And through this theory of like aesthetic experience, I mean, experimental aesthetics and embodied simulation, you also kind of, you're not just observing, but you also become a participating sort of, you also participate in this ritual through like, you know, these dynamics of cinema. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Daniel. And we can wrap up there, but just want to, in general, thank you, Daniel, as well as please extend this to Wangechi. Your fabulous two programs, and the conversations that followed, as well as, lots of thanks to Philippa for as well logging on early your morning and offering your thoughts. And of course, Ezra and Buki for being here in LA and sharing their thoughts, and as well as just kind of, the intentions and frameworks behind these films. So thank you, everyone. Thank you all for attending. Thanks for everyone. Have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.